This podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Tallman Equipment. Tallman Equipment prides itself in having more lineman tools in stock than anyone else. And now, when you're shopping online at tallmanequipment.com, look for the truck logo that says Fast Ship on hundreds of items on their website. That logo means that item is in stock and ready to ship the same day in most cases. When it comes to getting the tools and equipment linemen need, trust Tallman. Line 11 Clothing Company, making apparel for our first responders with a positive message to patriots that you can be proud of. The proceeds of the cause goes to helping our foundation ignite the fire for father engagement. Give them a follow at Line 11 Clothing on Instagram. And finally, Monzingo Knives. Each knife is created with craftsmanship that only a tradesman could provide. Find them on Instagram at Monzingo Knives and get your American-made Monzingo knife today. Hello, this is Jenny and David, and together we are directors and founders of the Show Up Dad Foundation and podcast. This is a ministry that encourages dads to become more than just a paycheck. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss our new marriage series, Lifeline, Marriage on the Line. All marriages, even the really good ones, need mending. The routine of jobs, kids, chores, and other commitments can overshadow romance and passion with any husband and wife. As a result, the couples can feel disillusioned or even alone. This is a platform for husbands and wives to come on and share what they do to be successful. Today, we are joined by Kyle and Hailey Vander Malle. They have been married for 3 years and together for 7. Kyle is a journeyman lineman for Potelco, and Hailey is a stay-at-home mom since last August, but used to work for a chiropractor and also as an esthetician. If I said that right. Anyhow, together they have 2 boys, a baby girl on the way due in August. Congratulations, by the way, on that. And they also are a blended family. Kyle having a son from a previous marriage. We welcome you both to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We're excited to be on here.
Absolutely, guys. Well, we just so happy that you're able to come on this. This is the third, right? Yeah, third episode of this. This is something that our audience brought forward and saying, hey, man, do you guys ever do anything for marriages or anything like that? We're like, oh, that's a great idea. Why not? So it seemed to really take off with our audience. And we're just happy to be able to get guys like you and couples like you to come on here and just be able to share what you do to be successful. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an honor.
So with that being said, we want to just kind of dive real quick into this and get right after the meat. Okay. So can you share with our audience what your preconceived ideas were about before you guys got married? Like, what did you guys think marriage was?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah. Well, I think we both had a really good understanding, or like a equal understanding, I feel like, of women are more inside, men are more outside. We knew that
we knew it's going to take teamwork.
Yeah.
I learned a lot of that from my previous marriage. And we definitely discussed a lot of things before we did get married, of what we expected, roles and whatnot, and helping each other out when we needed to.
I think with you going through a marriage previously, that led to us talking a lot more about things. We lived together before we got married, which isn't like the traditional way, but that was something that was important for us because, we got some of the nook and crannies out and, really figured out what worked for us and, before we got married. But I think
we both grew up pretty Christian-based families as well. So we had some expectations from watching on both of our parents. And we've had mentors over the years from our church, and we've sat down with, some friends from church and discussed a lot of things as well before we got married, and even sat down with our pastor and went over things. And because we had our struggles the first few years probably the middle of the last 7 years, we had some struggles, and but definitely sitting down and having those expectations when we did get married helped a lot of it. And we run strong as a team now. Everybody always compliments us on that and whatnot. But I think Main thing is just like we said, setting those boundaries, figuring out those roles, helping each other out when you need to, like figuring out, like, if I got stuff to do outside, she understands when I get home that that's a priority. And then, so like, if she's been with the kids all day, she knows that I'm not going to come home and help the kids right then and there when I have those projects outside and stuff like that. And same for her when she's got stuff going on inside the house and I come home from work. I'll she'll be like, hey, I got a lot to do. Can you help with the kids to bed and stuff like that? So those are roles that we kind of set beforehand.
And just having a clear communication.
Yeah.
Too, with what we need and what we need help with. And
yeah, communication is definitely key. That's something we've worked on for the last few years, big time.
We're always working on it. Let's be real.
Yeah, I think everybody does. Yeah, we communicate a lot. And one of the biggest things that we learned was it, I don't know if it was before we got married, but we plan out our weeks so we know what to expect. Plan out our months. She's more, she only gives me a week at a time on what to expect. This
is all you need to know.
She's the monthly planner. I'm like, this is what we're doing this week. This is what we're having for dinner. This is what we got on the agenda. We live a very busy, fast lives. So we got to make sure that we have our ducks in a row.
Yeah.
So it sounds like traditional roles were kind of modeled in your homes, and so you settled more into like a traditional style marriage.
Definitely.
Which is great. Yeah, and that's usually like a biblical perspective, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. With that being said, having those traditional roles and stuff like that did like one of the things my wife brought to me, she brought to my attention. She's like telling me that like when she grew up as a little girl, she always saw things on this in marriages, right? She looked at television, she saw this marriage on television, and it seemed like it was going to be all perfect and the perfect marriage, perfect wedding. And I see that even with my daughter, where she was even planning like her whole life, her marriage, how her wedding was going to go and everything like that. So with that being said, how has that transpired into your marriage now?
I think one thing, like growing up for me personally, like my family did like absolutely everything together. I mean, sometimes I look back, I'm like, I don't even know how my family made it work, but like we were always like, my brother played baseball, so we all played baseball. I mean, like we were all there. My dad coached, my mom was in the concessions. Who knows what I was doing, but running around, and like we went camping as families. And so for me, that was like something that I just always visioned in a marriage and in a family. Every evening we came home, or my parents came home, and we had dinner together as a family, and didn't matter who cooked it, because my parents got off about the same time, where my dad loves to cook, so that was more his role. But I think that's something that we've definitely taken, and I had those expectations that we had to really figure out. I mean, with our schedules, and I mean, he works a lot more crazy hours and I'm here all day. So figuring out like, how that plays into our lives and with our kids and things, how we can make it work. And I mean, we're at everything we can be together outside of his working hours.
Yeah. And same for me. I grew up, we had dinner as a family every night. Mom and dad came home from work, pretty traditional, So that's what I expected, growing up and seeing that. And my parents have been married for, I don't know how long, 30-some years now. And so I've learned a lot from them, learned a lot from her parents as well. They've been married for a long time, but we, like my expectations were definitely, I thought it was going to be easier when growing up. Then you get older and you get married, and it's two different opposite sex trying to get along and different mindsets, and it's a lot harder than you think. It's two different like for example, when we first started dating, you know, my parents, they had their arguments, they had their discussions, and that's what I see. And so I understood, like growing up, like you have to talk things out. You got to figure out, you got to resolve you got to figure out the situation, resolve it, right?
Mhm.
You got to discuss why you guys are fighting or whatever you want to call it, arguing, right? Whereas she grew up, and she can talk more about this, but she didn't see a lot of that.
Mhm.
So then when me and her had our first argument, she thought it was over.
I was like,
And she's like,
we're breaking
it's
up.
over. It's like, I'm like, no, like, it's okay, we can figure this out. We'll just discuss it. Like, you know, and we've
Mhm.
learned, you know, that's definitely helped us grow in our marriage, is learning how to communicate those situations and those hard times. And I mean, because everybody has those days where they get frustrated and they have something that sets them off at work, and then they bring it home, and then it just escalates, you know. And we've learned to deal with those things as well. And yeah, like I said, I think the biggest expectation that I had before getting married was just being a family oriented marriage.
Mhm.
And we both came into that way, and we discussed that, and we do that very well. Because like right now I work 12-hour days, but it's 14 hours I'm away from home because I got a 45-minute drive to work.
Mhm.
So sometimes, most days they wait till 7 o'clock when I get home for dinner to eat dinner, even though the kids are hungry. That, hey, they're like, no, we're gonna wait for dad to come home. We're gonna sit down with the family, eat dinner.
I mean, I don't starve my kids.
Yeah.
But we're waiting.
But,
Okay.
yeah. And there's nights where I work a little bit later and we have to heat the food up and stuff like that. But that's important to us, because that's our time to, you know, put our cell phones on the counter and talk as a family. You know, we were we asked the kids, like, so my niece lived with me for 2 years. And so we raised a 10-year-old girl. And then when my boy's here, older boy, and then so we had a very blended family at times. And we tried to teach him very much about, you know, discussing your day, you know, learning, and what did you learn today? What you know, what was your challenges? And that's our time to do that at the dinner table, you know.
Yeah, when he's only home in the evening for that long, like we really have to utilize that time frame. And so, you know, for us, it was important to really like be present, be at the table, have a meal, you know. And if that's the only 45 minutes we spend as a big family, then at least we have a good solid, you know.
And we both learned that from, you know, growing up in our families.
That's so important to be like in the moment when you have your family together, because I think sometimes we are thinking about the future, and then you totally miss the opportunities to appreciate those moments. Like talking about your day with the kids at the dinner table, which is something really simple, but it turns into these staple traditions that your family develops, and it builds such a security for your kids and stuff like that, to have those staple traditions. Like I think it's interesting to hear you guys both came from traditional backgrounds. My husband had a very traditional like upbringing where his mom was like the homemaker and his dad went out and worked. But I grew up in a very like kind of explosive, crazy like household. Like my parents had gotten divorced when I was 8 years old. And then I didn't have like a good idea of what marriage was coming into marriage. And so I took all these ideas from like movies and stuff like that. And a lot of them are based around like romanticism rather than the actual work that you put in to keep the marriage going. And so when we got married and that romanticism didn't happen like I saw in the movies, because, you know, in the movies, it's like they show the couple falling in love, and they live happily ever after, but then nothing happens after that. They just live happily ever after, right?
The end.
Yeah.
But I also was being fed messages of like this new, like really strong feminist type of culture that was coming up at that time, where women had careers and they were like really strong and they didn't work in the home and stuff like that. So I didn't have traditional views and he did. And so he automatically just kind of assumed that I would want to stay home. And it kind of really caused some crazy stuff in our
Yeah.
marriage, because I've talked to other line wives that kind of their husbands thought the same thing, that their wife just wanted to stay home.
Mhm.
So it's interesting now that you're staying home at even though you had a career as an esthetician, like what contributed to those thoughts and those ideas to have you stay home now?
Well, I think I always just kind of wanted to like be the one to raise my kids.
Mhm.
And so when I actually became a stay-at-home mom, I was working for a chiropractor, and I really, really enjoyed that. But they're long days. I was working like 4-10, so Monday through Thursday, 10-hour days, and finding childcare and his longer. I mean, my income wasn't really what we were living off of. And so when we had our youngest, I went back just 2 days a week, and we were fortunate to have family friends and his mom watching our youngest. Well, then when the summer was ending and we were going to lose that childcare for those 2 days, we were looking for sitters, and it was like a no-go. It was an immediate like, nope, not going to work for me. And you know, when you don't have someone that you like absolutely can trust, it makes it so much harder. He was also gonna start working a lot more hours, and so I knew that it wasn't in the cards for us.
Yeah.
So that was something that he was like, you have to really want to come stay home. Like my 2 days a week were like kind of like a little break. It was a vacation 2 days a week, and then you know the rest of the week was here and doing all things for the house and for the kids. But he was like, you got to really, it has to be your decision, and you have to want to stay home full time. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And
yeah, one of the bigger two is I went back to construction line work back a year ago in August. I worked at the co-op for 5 years. I came up construction and then went to the co-op when we first started dating. So I was actually working down in Southern California. And I was like, you either come down here or I come back home. I ain't doing this long distance thing, you know? And so I ended up getting that job, worked the co-op for 5 years. And then we were like, okay, it's time to have kids. And then we realized like, okay, what kind of life do we want? And so we set some goals and decided that construction is booming right now. So I decided to go back to construction. And so it was a big change. You know, I went from working 4 days a week, 40 hours a week to, you know, working some more. I'm on a pretty good job right now, it's nice. I've been home every night for the last year. So it was a good decision. But that was a big contribution to her being at stay at home, is we had to figure out, okay, where are we going to make this extra money? Because her income helped quite a bit, you know, when I was working at the co-op. So that was a decision that we had to make last summer. And I've been wanting to go back to construction for the last few years. And she could tell I was ready. She finally was like, just do it, go, it'll make you happier.
he thrives in like working hard and like different challenges.
Being challenged, yeah. I was, you know, I wasn't as challenged as much being at the co-op for the last few years, and she could tell it was affecting our marriage. It does affect that, you know, and you know, I think that it was one of the best decisions I ever did was go back to construction. Even though I work a few more hours, it's made our life a lot better. We get along great.
I think in general, as a person, when you're not being pushed to like your limits and not living up to everything that you know that you're capable of, it's hard on yourself, your self-esteem. At least for us. I guess I shouldn't talk for everyone else, but for us, that's kind of how we are. And so when we like, we're kind of living a little bit more like mediocre and like not as, you know, challenging ourselves, like it started to take a toll on. So.
And I could relate to you, Kyle, on that. I grew up construction as well, traveled all over. I made the decision to stay at home as well, to go and hire onto a IOU, an investor-owned utility. I lasted there for 3 years, and that was probably the most miserable time I had ever experienced. Like you, it started affecting our marriage, to the point where she wanted to leave me, and it was the same thing. I didn't feel like I was being challenged. And when I did step up to the plate and start doing things, I was met with opposition. I was met with, you're making us look bad. Why are you working so hard? Don't look at that. I'd be like, hey man, that's falling down. Don't look at it. Someone else will get it. You know what I mean? And when you grow up in construction and you grow up with that pride in the industry of, hey man, that we can make this work, we can make this happen. And then you're met with guys who are like, don't even look at it. You're taking someone else's overtime, whatever.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're clipping your wings.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that's how I felt. And my God, I was so miserable. And you come home and you start, it starts affecting you, and it gets inside you, and it starts affecting your family. I started taking my angst upon my wife and just being really miserable. What about you? Like, what did you feel during that?
I want to kind of add a backstory to that. Like, we had prayed for him to be home for 7 years. And because he was out of town all the time, and we were freshly married when he first got into the trade. And so it was really hard on me to be alone. And so we had prayed for him to be home working at the utility for 7 years. He finally got to the utility. And I think for him, it was like, okay, I've arrived and I've reached the pinnacle of what we prayed for. And now I don't really need to do anything or work for anything after that point. Even though you wanted to work hard, you weren't being challenged. And so it did cause major problems. And it was hard for me because I was like, okay, now that he's at the utility, I can start going to school and do things for myself and stuff. But those things kind of never took place because he just was not okay. He just was not in a good spot. And so we really had to work on things. And I was always like, let's go on a date night and let's go do this. And it wasn't until he finally got out of that position that it opened up a space for us to reconnect. That's how much of a block it was in our marriage. I mean, just the environment he was in, it was a pretty toxic environment though. All the men didn't like their marriages, or they were all of them were divorced a couple times over. And it wasn't a very, very healthy environment.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. What I didn't like is the fact, and I'm not trying to bash on utilities, whatever, there's goods and there's bads, I was home every night, right? I knew where I was going to sleep. But even though I was home, I wasn't home because I was always on the overtime or always out, right? So that's one of the things that people got to understand when they get into utilities. It's like, okay, yeah, you may be at your home, but you're not going to be home because now if you're the lowest on the totem pole, guess what? You're taking the call outs. You're working those holidays and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And it's a trade-off. And I think it's important for couples to be able to reassess that, right? Because when your spouse's dream becomes your spouse's nightmare, you got to reassess that. And that's what I did. I was like, okay, I'm home. I'm not going to be on the road. You can go to school. And then now I'm not really home. You know what I mean? And even when I'm there, I'm at work mode because I'm miserable. You know what I mean? I'm miserable. I'm thinking about the job. I'm thinking about the guy I'm working with. I'm thinking about how this dude almost got me killed. You know what I mean? All this different stuff going on. And it was really toxic. It was really toxic,
We couldn't live in the moment.
No.
Which was really hard. And I think that takes away the joy of your marriage is when you're not living in the moment. And then he worked at night. So we didn't even get the dinner time, table time, which allows the family to really reconnect. So I think even if you don't get dinner time, if you can have breakfast time or some kind of time with all of your family where you all get together around the table and you reconnect, it really does make a difference if it's on a daily basis, because it's you're grounding yourself back into the family dynamic, which is good. How do you guys stay grounded when you get overwhelmed with life?
I think just because our faith and our foundation of our marriage was so strong and like built so strong that even in the craziness, like we are currently in like a really crazy season of our life. Like people are like, you guys are crazy.
Yeah, we're like trying to sell a house, buy a house, having a baby. All the above.
It's been crazy. But just knowing, like, our realtor was like, you guys are crazy. How are you doing it? We had our like house going, this is the third time it's been under contract. And I'm like, I just have to say, like, it is what it is. God's plan is bigger than ours. And so no matter what, like knowing that it's going to come back to what's meant to be in God's will is like, that's how we stay grounded in it. And just knowing, like, and routines. I mean, for the everyday things, like knowing that we have routines, and if one day or 1 week is going to be thrown off and crazy, we'll get back into our routine, you know, the next week or the next day or whatever.
And definitely like that took time to get to that point. Like she's a lot more laid back than I am. I'm more of the high stress person, and like I'm like, I don't like to be late to things, stuff like that type of person. Like,
well, I don't like to be late to things either.
Yeah,
but you don't stress about it all the way until we get there.
She's the type of person that like it'll work itself out. It is what it is. It's gonna work. She has that, you know, faith in herself and in God's plan, and so do I. But it's taken years of, you know, us figuring things out and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And when you know, my biggest thing is I used to stress about money, being the provider for my family. Like I always want my family to have food on the table, roof over their head. And like when my bank account gets low, it puts a stress on me. And she knows that. And so, you know, we had to discuss finances before we got married. We had to discuss all that.
I think finances is where we were really different.
Yeah, because I do take care of all our finances, which a lot of times in other marriages, the woman does it, in my opinion. Like my mom did it for my dad, and
my mom does it.
Her mom does it for their family, but I take care of it for mine because that was one of the things from my first marriage that caused a lot of issues. So I just learned to take care of that. And then
we were also established, like you had the house, you had car payments, you had where I had insurance on a used car that I paid cash for, like, you know, like my bills were like nothing, you know. So then I moved in with you, and then I kind of just adapted into your finances, I guess.
Yeah. Which was good. You didn't have a lot of baggage.
I really didn't. You didn't get a credit card for the first time. Like I didn't have a credit card. I was like, I don't need one. I make money, then I spend it, and then I, you know, save what's left over.
But I think
like, you need credit. I guess I do.
But yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing is we just really worked on what hasn't and has worked. Life gets stressful because we've gone through some tough times over the past, just since we got married, you know, and like with our boy, she went in the hospital, wanted to have birth, and it would turn into emergency C-section, and we were not prepared for that, you know.
Not even a little bit, you
know. And they can't do much for 6 weeks. It's a major thing for the woman. And so it was like, okay, we got to figure out, you know, who's gonna help, who can help us here, and figure out what days I can work and not work. And we figured it out, and we've definitely learned a lot over the years on that stuff, and we've implemented that. You know, we've learned to think of, okay, let's see what hasn't worked. I feel like some people just keep trying, but they don't take a second to think, okay, this does not work. Let's discuss this and make a plan of what we can try next time. That's helped us. We've tried to grow in our marriage, and that's helped us figure it out.
That's what I keep hearing when you guys talk, is that you guys are really fluid and adaptable. Whereas like, I think couples that face rigidity in their marriage, it makes it really hard to flex and move with the ever-changing environment, the ever-changing things that take place in life. And I think that's what I keep hearing when you guys talk. You're like, well, yeah, I just kind of like, I adapted to his lifestyle, or you adapted with her, or you guys talked about it and realized this wasn't working, or you guys discussed your goals beforehand and then kind of stuck with the plan, which is really neat.
Yeah, especially coming from guys like, guys in our trade or our industry and stuff like that. A lot of times we're hard dudes. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I was in the military, I was a combat medic, stuff like that. I've worked with some of the greatest men on earth, and coming into the line industry, these guys were just as hard, if not harder.
Yeah.
Our mindsets are out of control. Our egos, right? Sometimes our egos. And with that being said, being that hard, that rigidity that she talks about, a lot of times we don't want to bend. It's our way or no way, and how many times in our industry have we talked about 6 one way, half a dozen the other way, as long as there's the same end goal, right? It's, we can do it. There's different ways for every different thing. And you get these guys who are just stuck in their ways, who don't want to bend. And I was one of them, right? Who, no, this is the way it is. And just like in our marriage too, I deal with the finances. You know what I mean? And she kind of just came in, and I had my bank account, and we've had that bank account for going on 18 years now, 19 years, you know what I mean? So, and that's just the way it was, but I think a lot of times that rigidity, that unwillingness to bend really does affect a marriage. So it's good to see that you guys are able to think you're doing good multitasking.
Yeah.
We want to multitask, but there's no such thing as multitasking, because somewhere, some way, something's going to fail. You're not going to be good at everything. Right. So I think in a marriage, in life in general, being where your feet are, where if you're at work, be at work 100%, focus on that. And you're in your marriage, at the dinner table, whatever, be there, be 100% there, focus on that. You know what I mean? And I think that helps out more than just trying to take on all these different tasks where we're spreading ourselves thin. I had a guest come on here and we talked about how voltage leaks, right? You have a transformer, it's overloaded, you have all these different services coming off it, you're losing voltage, right? You're having these drops as it goes, right? It's the same thing with us. If we have all these different things where our energy is being leaked out to, we're not going to have enough. We're not going to have enough for our children. We're not going to have enough for our wife. We're not going to have enough for our work. So we got to really just concentrate on where we're at that moment, live in that moment. Right.
Being in the present, man. That's something that me and her actually, we've been complimented on that by people. When she worked at the chiropractor, they never knew a thing that was going on at home. She would be 100% there at work, work a day, and they, I don't know.
We literally adopted our niece, and my boss was like, I didn't realize it was like that serious of the problem. Like, why don't you talk about it? Like, I come to work and I do my work, and then I come home and I go home, and like.
And same with, me, that's one thing I always tell guys in the trade is like, you got to keep family life at home, unless it's an emergency, and focus on what you're doing, because what we do is very dangerous. You can't be thinking in the back of your head, okay, what has my wife got going on right now? And as you're dealing with live wires, one little mistake and you're not going to have another chance. So something that we both strive, and we teach that to our kids, being in the present of where you're at. And when I come home from work, my work stays at work, and I come home and I devote my time to my kids and my wife. And, we just, like I said, we adapt. Before I worked this job that I'm on right now, we put our younger boy to bed at like 7:30, but Hailey's like, okay, your bedtime is going to change to like 8:39 so that you could spend time with your dad, so that I could see him when I come home. So we just adapted. Like, he goes to bed later. That's our younger 2-year-old boy. So because or else I wouldn't get to see him the whole week, So we just learned to work as a team and adapt that way, in being in the present. And we hold each other accountable for that too. Like, we will tell each other, like, hey, get off the phone, focus, like, come on, we got like family time going on right now. And we've learned to not argue back with each other. And all these things that we talked about haven't come easy. It's been a work in progress the last 7 years. I mean, our first 2 years of dating were just fun, but it got real she moved in, and we had to make sure our family was going to work, and then we got married. And I was one of the reasons I think it took so long for me to even ask her to marry me is I was scared to death to get married again until I had a lot of conversations with some influential men in my life, and they basically just said, why, what's holding you back? And I was like, nothing other than my previous marriage. And they're like, well, is she like that? And I'm like, nope. So yeah, it's she changed my life.
Close it in, right? Coming home.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the important things that our foundation is kind of built upon is really helping men like look at their situation and want to work on their relationship. So that way, when they come to the workplace, they are safe and they're in the moment. Because I know that sometimes men have a tendency to kind of be in an avoidant type of attachment style where they will work a lot or really delve into their hobbies or things like that. So that way they don't have to deal with the pain of what's happening at home.
Yep.
But that's kind of one of the things that we really wanted to address with the podcast, is because if you start working on the things at home and you start fixing those things, you actually free up this brain space to be able to be present in the moment and enjoy those moments, or to be at the job site and not be freaking out or worrying because your wife is not happy. And you're like with us, when things weren't good in our marriage, like he would get off of work and then he would probably be regretting talking to me at the end of the day, because I was dealing with so much at home. I was just so overwhelmed all the time. And sometimes those were really hard conversations. I would try to refrain from dumping on him after work, because I knew he was in a dangerous job, but at the same time, I was like, not okay.
Yeah.
And it was definitely hard because I was out of state. I mean, there's not much you can do, from several hundred or 1,000 miles away, you know what I mean? And say, for instance, you had a great day at work, your crew got the attaboy or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you're friggin' feeling all this high, and then your wife calls you, and then all of a sudden she's telling you about how the kid broke his leg or something happened or the pump gave out or, we had a lot of animals. We had a farm that she had to take care of. We had over 300 chickens, 3 kids, 5 dogs, 4 cats, and acreage.
An acre of land with like 20 some fruit trees and grass. And if the grass was not good when he got home, he was sad.
Oh, dude, I'd get so mad. I would come home and I'd be like, my God, what did you do here?
Yeah, that's me right there.
Bro.
Yeah.
But we were like trying to grow grass and sand, and the 300 chickens would rip up the grass. So I was like, how do I keep this grass going?
It was counterproductive. It was crazy. Like I worked so hard to keep it going until finally I was like, you know what, this is crazy. Kind of like what you talked about, Kyle, how you have to reassess it, you know what I mean? And doing the same thing over and over again, that's considered insanity, right?
Yeah.
And expecting a different result. Well, that's kind of where I was at. And I see that in a lot of men that I talk to. They get stuck in that rut to where they're doing the same thing over and over again. And sometimes it takes another person to see it, because you can't see it while you're in it. You just don't know it's not working. And then we're so driven as men, so hard-headed. By golly, I'm going to make it work. I don't give a crap if I got to unload, 3 yards of dirt by hand because I don't have the tractor today, you know what I mean? Or whatever, you're going to do it. And we did. Twice.
Literally with like a wheelbarrow and shoveling to level out our land. It was crazy.
But it's definitely one of those things where, you got to be self-aware and you got to deal with those issues, because they will affect your family eventually, whatever you don't deal with, you internalize, especially for men. I think this is where a lot of men are having suicide, because in our industry, a lot of guys are committing suicide right now, and what it is with men, we don't know how to deal with our issues. We don't want to really talk about our issues. So we internalize those issues, and then it comes out in another form, which is anger. So we start being angry with our spouse, in turn, that's not good because now that's putting added pressure to us because they're unhappy. And then eventually either you get divorced or you go into this sad bubble where you don't want to talk about anything. And then next thing you know, you feel like there's no hope, you know?
Or you anesthetize with all kinds of different things like
Yeah.
hobbies and stuff like that. But yeah, it's interesting to be able to look at those things. But I think it's important too for wives to make a safe space for their husband to come to them.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you make a safe space for Kyle, Hailey? Like, how do you keep it safe so he knows he can come to you like about whatever it is that he needs to come to you?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
She's a good listener.
Mm.
She is.
Thanks for taking that one. I just think that more than just like marriage, we're a team, we're friends. Like I feel like we just go to each other for everything. Like we have done a really good job of making sure that, like, you know, if there is something hard, like we can figure it out together. And, you know, you work hard, we play hard. But I think just being someone that is we're right for each other, in my opinion. So I think that makes it easier to talk to.
Yeah. But we started at the beginning, like I said, it wasn't always this easy. We you know, when we first got together, I'm more of kind of what you were saying, David, is I held a lot of stuff in from my divorce. From, you know, I felt like my heart was stone, dude. It was like I couldn't give to anybody. It was hard for me to love and all that jazz, you know, and because I just went through some tough times, and then went through some tough times with my parents. And it definitely wasn't until we got together and I started talking about these things, and she's very good at like looking at it. She's very good at looking at it from a different perspective. She can, I always go to her, I'm like, hey, what's your perspective on this? Because she can look at it from a way different perspective than I can, even if I don't agree with her. But you know, I started talking about my past and stuff, and we started going over things, and then I, you know, talked about some things with, you know, some of our mentors in our life, and that's helped over the years. We definitely have had, you know, we've had people in our lives that we've gone to and sat down with multiple discussions and worked things out of how we can do better. Getting somebody else's perspective is the number one key. And, you know, swallowing your pride as a man and being vulnerable and being able to discuss those things it's hard, but you will be better in the end if you do it.
Yeah.
She used to be the type of person that just cried all the time, like, and that was something that we had to work on. And she's good now. Like, it's just, she's got this,
It's like once a week now.
Got this strength. She's a very strong woman now, you know, and she was strong back then, but she did have those times where we would try to discuss things, and we weren't even fighting. We were just discussing things, and she would just break down.
And I think that goes back to.
And then I was like, well, I can't talk to you now because anything I say is going to make it worse. And words can't even come out of your mouth.
No.
So those were things that we had to discuss with people. And so, you know, some of our close mentors, and that's helped over the years. And like I said, it's definitely getting it out. It's way better than balling it in, because it's, for me, like, if I leave it inside of me, it's going to come out, and it's going to come out bad, and it's not going to be good, and I'm going to blow up, and it's going to be taken out on probably my family, because that's where I'm more comfortable in this household rather than at work. Or it sometimes does come out at work. Where I've been around guys that have a lot of issues going on, and they got a lot of stuff balled out, and they're just pissed off and angry at work. But yeah, I think that was a little bit of a rabbit trail, I feel like that.
No, that was good.
I was thinking about that when you were talking about keeping it inside, David, and that's something that I had to work on over the years. And I definitely, I had to sit down and have a hard conversation with my parents because we were not getting along and not happy. And I was mad at them. And one day we were outside my house and I was like, we're going to have a hard conversation. It's going to suck. And been better ever since.
Yeah.
Having those hard conversations is key.
It's crazy that you said that, because just today, I had a hard conversation with my old man. And this is the first time I've ever had a heart to heart with him like that. I love my dad. He's a hard dad. And we finally had a heart to heart. And it was good. It was good just to get those emotions out and just to be able to tell him I love you, and just to hear, I'm proud of you and the man you become, and it was emotional, you know what I mean? But as men, we need to hear that, we got to have those hard conversations. That's something that I was never able to do and never wanted to do. That was the only man I have ever feared in my life. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I had never heard him cry. The only time I heard him cry is when I lost my younger brother. And other than that, I have never heard him cry. And this is the second time I've ever heard him cry. And, so it's good. It's good to have those conversations and get those emotions out and to be able to discuss it as men, because that's what a true man is. The true man is being able to share and have that empathy and have that realization, just like with her, you're able to come to her because she created that safe space. Right. And you're able to share them. You may not agree with what she says, because I know, like, for me, sometimes I come to my wife and I might not agree what she's saying, but deep down inside, it's affecting me. It's really working on me. In fact, and I'll give you one example. I stopped drinking probably 15 years ago. Okay. And it wasn't because me being a Christian. It wasn't because of me, every single bad thing I ever did in my life was because I was drunk, right? Every bad decision and all that. It wasn't any of that. I started justifying drinking. Oh, well, Jesus turned water into wine. That was the first miracle. And, you can be drunk or you can drink, but you can't be drunk and all this other stuff. I tried every single thing. Right. And I like to drink. And she came to me one day and while I was, cooking on the gazebo, and she's like, hey, I'm not going to tell you can't drink. So, but if you're okay with your daughter growing up and having that smell and getting familiar with that smell on you, and she goes up to grow up and to be familiar and comfortable with that smell in another man, then I'm okay with that. I'll never bother you again. And that's what hit me. It hurt bad, dude. And I'm like, oh, why the hell would you say that to me? You know what I mean? But dude, it cut me deep, bro. And I have never touched alcohol ever since that day.
It's awesome, man.
But it was those hard conversations like that,
Yeah.
And I got to give you, props for that, because that took her to be, that's some courage for her to come to me and talk to me like that. Cause I was not the easiest person to talk to. At all,
I'd have to fluff up the area first, Hey, you're so
feel that courage.
Hey, my best friend.
Hey, buddy, guess what?
It's good because when you can talk about the difficult things when they come up, it makes simple conversations easier. So I know in a lot of marriages you can't even have simple conversations. I know at one point in our marriage we couldn't even have simple conversations without them turning into a fight, because I was harboring so much hurt and pain, and he had so much hurt and offense and stuff like that, where the simplest thing, I'll just give you an example. One day I made pancakes and I made I warmed up some blueberries for my son, but I didn't warm up blueberries for him. And he's like, oh, I feel disrespected because you didn't warm up blueberries for me. Why did I get blueberries? It was just something so simple like that. But he was really dealing with some internal battles in our marriage that came out in that simple conversation. And it turned out into a fight over blueberries.
And it wasn't necessarily the blueberries. It was what we were talking about, Kyle, internalizing stuff. I was dealing with not feeling respected in our
Yeah.
marriage, because that's a man, there's a book called Love and Respect by Dr. Emerson Eggerichs, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about the deepest need for a man is respect. The deepest need for a woman is love. They need to feel love. And it's this vicious cycle that continues to go. When a wife doesn't feel loved, she won't give the man respect. When the man doesn't have respect, he will not give this wife love. And it's this crazy cycle that they fall upon, right? And he talks about how that's our need. We need to feel respected. And at that moment, it came out with those pancakes at Blueberry, which was not necessarily anything to do with anything, right? But it came out because I hadn't dealt with it, because I hadn't talked to her about how I was feeling internally. I had just put it in until, like you said, it freaking had no place to go, and it came out with blueberries.
Yeah. No, that's that when you're hit on that love and respect thing, that's I think we have that book.
Mhm.
We that makes me hit on a point of when I learned about the 5 love languages, and that's striving to be better in those has also helped our marriage, and everything that you're working on your marriage hopefully will make your marriage stronger. That's what's helped us over the years. But like for her, we're completely opposite on what makes us happy. She wants quality time, so she likes her
I'm like
her
touch
cuddle time,
and
touching like 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day, whether it's on the couch, whether it's right before we go to sleep.
if we can lay in bed and you can just like
Hold me, yeah.
for 5
She's happy.
minutes, we're great. Like
So hey, even though I'm tired, yeah, we're gonna cuddle in bed. Like,
Yeah.
We touch feet.
yeah.
or not feet. I hate feet though.
But she and then for me, like you said, it's I can see where that respect thing completely comes into play. Like when I come home, she doesn't have, I've never asked her to do this, but she will, she tries to make sure that dinner's ready.
Mhm.
If I'm working late hours, if I come home before dinner time, then I'll help her cook it, whatever. But she tries to make sure that dishes are done. And like I've never one time asked her to make my lunch, but she'll do it here and there because she knows that I'm tired this night and we're gonna have to get that 15 minutes of extra sleep the next morning. And so she just really is very thoughtful of that, and that makes me feel respected. That this hard work is for not just myself but for my family.
I think what I keep hearing in all these couples that we talk to is that the successful marriages are successful because they continue to prioritize each other over anybody else.
Yep.
And I hear that, like, even in your marriage, you prioritize like his making a lunch for him, putting dinner on the table, so that way when he comes home, that's one less thing he has to worry about. And that's you showing him how much you love him and care for him and respect him, and vice versa. Like you're coming to her about your feelings, or you'll hug her in the bed, even though that might not be something you really particularly want to do for 5 minutes, but you'll do it anyway because you value her as a person. And I think that it makes for a successful marriage is when you value the other person above anybody else.
Yeah. And I think like going back to talking about like how you can come to me for things and being a safe place. Like we've talked recently about knowing that even if it is a hard conversation that we're going to have with each other, or a criticism or a correction, anything along those lines, knowing that, or even if we are in an argument of something, knowing that like the foundation of that is not coming from any place of like hatred or anger. Like it's coming from wanting us to be better in the long run, as individuals and as a couple, always knowing that like the end result is not like to harp on you or to, vice versa, like, to change me or anything. It's to make our relationship and our household better and run smoother and things like that. And comes out of a place of love versus anything else. Like
letting each other grow too. Like me letting, like letting each other grow in your own areas. When we had our discussions before we got married and as we were dating of what we expected out of each other, like you can't expect them to change like that. You have to let that person grow. And that's been, on my part, I've had to be super patient about that. Because we were raised differently, but also similar in certain areas. And I've had to let you grow a lot. You've had to let me grow a lot. And
I think you're really good at like, okay, taking something and being like, oh, that's what you want changed, or like that's what we need to work on. Like, boom, it's worked on. And I'm like, oh, I gotta really get to that point. So like he has to be a lot more patient with me. I feel like that if I'm like, hey, let's drink more water, then he's like, he's had 3 more water bottles in a day. And I'm like, well, I took a few more sips today. He's really good at, I'm not as good at with criticism, I should say.
Yeah.
But I'm always like, you got to be patient with me, babe.
Yeah. We're kind of the same way. David's like the driver. Like,
yeah.
Like in our old house, he would be like, what do you want to do in the front yard? And I would tell him what my plans were. And then like that day he would be calling a bulldozer and all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, those weren't set in stone. He's like, well, let's get it done.
Yeah.
And so then it would be like already in the works and stuff like that. But it was always interesting because it's important kind of to have the opposites present, because I do ground him, because there would be times where he would be working out of town all week and then he'd go to the mountains and like bring home all kinds of wood and then like erect an entire fortress around our house with this new Latia fence. And then I would have to be like, okay, you really need a rest. Like,
and they go back to work.
This is not okay. You know what I mean? You're going to like burn yourself out. So it's really important kind of to have those opposites. But I wanted to say one thing that I thought was interesting. We are on the same team. And like what you're saying, that when you go into a fight believing and knowing that that person really means for the best, rather than to tell you something to hurt you, they're saying it for the success of the marriage. He always used to tell me, because I had such a bad perspective of our marriage, and it was really a lot of my own thinking, but he would always tell me, I'm not your enemy. Like we're on the same team. We're fighting for the same thing. And I always remember that. Your spouse is not your enemy. If you guys are fighting for the same thing and you both want the same thing, you guys are not enemies. You're on the same team, and you're so much stronger when you're working together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Kyle, and we appreciate you guys coming on here and talking to us. Hailey, thank you for coming on and sharing on our show. I know it's going to help out a lot of our listeners. And can I ask you guys to go ahead, if you want to, share with our audience how people can get a hold of you, just in case they want to reach out to you on Instagram or something like that, if they have questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. We're truly honored that you asked us to be on the show. We had a good time. It was fun, a lot of laughs, and hopefully, the audience can take what they want and learn, and help their marriage out with whatever they got out of what we've discussed here. But yeah, I think for me, I gotta figure out what
I know, I just had to pull it up. I was like, I don't know what.
For my social media, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and my Instagram is where?
You're just Kyle Vander Malle, all one word.
Yeah, just Kyle Vander Malle, all one word. Same with my Facebook, they're linked together. And your
my Instagram is Hai Vander Malle, and then my Facebook is just Hailey Vander Malle.
Okay.
So yeah,
we'll put that on the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But thank you guys once again. You guys just continue to do what you're doing, and we thank you for coming on and sharing with our audience.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
Absolutely. And congratulations too, and God bless you on your new baby that's coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.